Buongiorno, everybody. So we are here now. We are in the town of Syracuse in Sicily, and we're at the Neapolis Archaeological Park. And today we're at somewhere very special. We're in the Teatro del Greco, or the Greek Theater, and it's one of the places that I really wanted to come to. And there's so much history of Sicily right here that I really wanted to share. So quickly, we're going to show. You can see this is one of the largest Greek theaters of the ancient world. Syracuse was a Greek colony. A lot of times we think Americans were the only ones that were ever part of a colonial movement, but there was a colonial movement in ancient Greece in the 700s, 800s BC, and one of the major colonies was here in Syracuse. In fact, Syracuse expanded to being larger than most major Greek cities, and there was a point in the world where it was the largest city in the Greek-speaking world. You can see here still the original seats from the Greek theater. And as a lot of you guys know and have studied, we have so much of our roots of our theater culture from here in Greece. All of this was carved out of a single piece of limestone. So we just learned today that it's something they called monolithic, as in it was just one piece of stone. And you can see the seats. You can hear the worker crews going right now because they are taking down the remnants of a stage, because still in May, in June, we just missed it, in Sicily they do the ancient Greek plays in modern Italian for the people in this area. But what I think is really cool is the reason why we came to Sicily is there's so much history stacked up on each other in layers. And this is what I really wanted to point out. And I was working with our guide, Biagio, and he showed us that if you look down there, you can see the openings, giant openings. They were not part of the original Greek temple. What they were openings because this place became a Roman arena. And the one you're looking at now is where the gladiators came out. And then from the other side is where animals would come out. So the Romans turned this into an arena. And then if you go up there, you can see that these openings were part of Byzantine tombs from about the 7th, 8th century AD. So for even them, this would have been ancient, coming into this area. And they had burial tombs there for the Christian burial practices. And then, if you look up here, this is from about 500 years ago, about the 1600s, and it's a Spanish house for when the Spanish Empire occupied Sicily. And then those tombs, again, we can keep going. And in the 1940s, they were used for the Syracusans to hide from the bombings as the Allied forces, really led a lot by Americans, came in to take the area. So you can see, even in this amazing, ancient, historic, ancient place, we can see the history of Syracuse stacked up on each other. And this is one of the best examples of Greek amphitheaters in the world. And the acoustics, absolutely beautiful and impressive in this area. So I want to thank you guys for checking in, and we'll stop at one or two more places. All right, we're at the top of the Teatro del Greco, and a couple things I wanted to show. One, it's beautiful up here, but you can see the ocean out that way. That's the Mediterranean, and not too far. Right now we're facing south, so if we were to continue through there and kind of go along the coastline, that would be toward Africa. But we can see at the top, and all this still, some of these were taken out, some of these seats, but still all of this all the way up here would have been seats. But I wanted to show another thing. So it's important to remember that when you're looking at ancient cities, water is life. There's a reason why, for example, if you read the Bible and you read the Old Testament, where so much of the discussion, especially in the first 5 books, is about springs, because springs were life. And in the hot, arid areas where people were living and settling in the like 3000, 2000, 1000 BC, you had to have a natural spring. Here you can see still coming through water from what used to be an ancient Greek aqueduct, and we're talking 500 BC. The water would pump water from the nearby mountains, and it would get all the way here, so you'd have fresh water right by the theater, which would really make this a center for everybody, because this is where you come to get your water. Also in Ortigia, the small island where we're staying, there's a pool that has a natural spring that actually goes under part of the Mediterranean and pops back up. The cool thing is, in this area of Sicily, anywhere with fresh water, not right here because this is an aqueduct, has papyrus. Which you might remember, papyrus is what the Egyptians had in North Africa, and it's where they would, you could take the papyrus reed, unfold it, and use it as paper. So very, very expensive, very, very important, because you could use record keeping without carving into rocks. So Sicily, besides North Africa, is the only other area of the world where papyrus grows naturally, and it's because of springs, kind of like this one, but this one's a man-made spring in the form of a Greek aqueduct.
L'astro d'argento, placide l'onda, prospero il vento. Venite all'agile, barchetta mia, Santa Lucia.
All right, now where we just were, you'll see we were just in what was called by Caravaggio, the Renaissance painter, the ear of Dionysus. Because the entrance looks like an ear, and I'll post a picture on the blog. We have Biagio, our tour guide. He was singing in there, and he actually sang a song dedicated to Santa Lucia, or Saint Lucy, who's the patron saint of Syracuse. But what I wanted to show here is behind me is a natural column. I might need to move some people away. So behind me is a natural column, and what this all was here in Syracuse was a stone quarry, because the Greeks needed to make the city out of stone. So they dug in. This was all one big hill. But what you can't see is that the hill and the quarry had a natural roof. And this is a natural column, a monolithic column that they left. They didn't build, but they cut around it. It was a pillar to support the weight of a roof. And this whole area was called a latomia, a place for the stone cutters. But all of this would have had a giant stone roof until the 1600s. So really, for thousands of years, you could come here and there would be a giant stone roof above us. But then there was an earthquake, like in so many times in the Mediterranean, when we see ruins, an earthquake, these areas are very prone to earthquakes because they're on tectonic plates. But you can imagine it would be thousands and thousands of slaves cutting stone by hand. And one of the reasons I wanted to show it is because a lot of times we think that we're so advanced in the modern age, and of course we are, but you forget the brilliance of the ancients. An individual person was just as intelligent as a person today, and you imagine the architectural and the structural knowledge you'd have to be able to cut stone out and leave a roof that would last for 1,000 years. And that's one of the things we're seeing here in the town of Syracuse. All right, everyone. So this is one of the final stops on our tour. This is the Ara de Rone, or the area of sacrifice. And this is about 300 BC. There's a lot you can't see. This would have been a massive structure. This is just the base, just the steps. Again, monolithic, carved out of one stone. Here in Sicily, it's all limestone, by the way. If we were in Greece, it would be something more like marble. But so what you'll see is these steps, and what they would do here is this is where they would make sacrifices to the gods, whether Zeus, Dionysius, or Hera, or Minerva, very big here, which is the Roman version of Athena. So you would see they would do sacrifices. In fact, the biggest sacrifice they had here, the traditional big scale sacrifice, is something called the ekaton, which in Greek means 100. It's still the word for 100 in Greek today. So here, one of the largest sacrifices they had was 4.5 ekaton, and they had 450 bulls, all sacrificed here. And so what they would do, and it seems very wasteful, right? Well, that's not what would happen on the sacrifices, because conveniently, the gods only desired the entrails, so like the guts of the animals. So you can imagine like the smell of butchering 450 bulls. They would do it, and they would sacrifice and burn the guts, and then what do you do with the rest of the meat? It's time for a barbecue. And so what you would have is really the Mediterranean diet for a long time was just fruit and vegetables and a little bit of bread, olive oil, of course, for fat, which is very important. But here, what they would do, and then very small fish. But the only time when you would eat meat would be during these big sacrifices. So you can imagine the party and the festival you would have for this city that was huge. 300,000 people in Syracuse at its biggest. Right now it's only about 170. For reference, that's about as big as Richmond, at least intra-city. It's a little bit smaller, but I mean, we're talking 3rd century BC, 300,000 people is huge. And so they have this huge party, 450 bowls, giant barbecue, all to honor the gods, but also a big party. And when Christianity came, this was one of the big things that was that was taken out of the religion. A lot of the Roman and the Greek pagan traditions were kind of adopted into Christianity, but one of the things that was not were these sacrifices. And so you wouldn't have things like this. The Spanish took a lot of this when they came in here and took the rest of the fortifications. So again, we only have the base, but it's amazing to imagine what it must have been like to be at one of those events at the Archaeological here in Syracuse, one of the most traditionally Greek antiquated places you can go, not in Greece, but here in Syracuse, where it still survives today.